Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Here in the bell tower, the main entrance that you see from the street, we have many things sort of sitting around. One of the things that is here is a bookcase, and on the bookcase you'll find a whole bunch of these. You can see them over here right now. These are copies of this year's Help book. It's put out every year by a group called Open Hearth, and it contains information for people who are dealing with all sorts of situations and lists groups and places and people that they can turn to find help with some of the concrete questions and issues and situations that they may be having. You will find things listed like in-home care, income assistance, but a big one that is here, coming after senior services and shelters, is one that says substance abuse and addiction. In my sermon today, I realized after I had written it that I referred to a situation that had to do with substance abuse. And I want to clarify, and here it'll be before you see the sermon, so you know going into it. I want to clarify some of the things that I say around it in the sermon. I'm talking about a specific situation for a specific person. First off, I want to say that anything that I say is already public knowledge. I'm not telling someone's story without their permission or without them having already shared things. That would not be appropriate, to say the least. It would be unethical. But someone's story, when it conveys hope, which it will, that is what we have to go on. Someone once said that the purpose of preaching, the nature of preaching, I think it was Charles Spurgeon, said, it's one beggar telling another where to find bread. And we do tell one another, I hope, the ways in which Jesus has reached out to people with real help, and how we can tell one another about situations where he has been the bread that someone has needed. The story I tell is one that is about addiction. And I don't want it to come out sounding as if there's a simple equation between addiction and sin. Addiction is a physical and emotional and psychological condition. And it arises from a variety of situations. And it plays out differently in different people's lives. And yes, sometimes it leads people to do things that are sinful. But so do many other things. The condition in and of itself is not a sin. Failure to care for someone, failure to offer help when we can do it, that is a sin. We cannot always do everything for someone. To think that is pride, and pride is a sin. To think that we ourselves are not in need of help with all sorts of things including sometimes help dealing with the addiction of people we love or work with or who are our neighbors, whoever they may be. Not caring for ourselves in those situations is ignoring the needs of someone whom God loves, which is us too. So in here you'll find references and referral sources to groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. You'll also find referrals to groups like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon for the families and friends of people that are dealing with addiction. You'll find the numbers of hospitals, and you'll find all sorts of things. People are addicted to many things other than substances. There's help in here if someone's dealing with a gambling addiction. These books are found all over our area, in many spots. If you see one, hold on to one. If you need to share it with somebody, share it with them. If you know somebody who's looking for other resources in other areas of life, it's a good place to start. So having said all of that, offering correction to the sermon that I will be preaching later in this video, let me above all mention that there's another book that offers a lot of help that goes even beyond this, and it's called the Bible. And if you need one of those, let us know. We'd also be glad to share that with you. We're a bunch of beggars telling other beggars where to find bread. Today we hear the gospel from the 15th chapter of Luke, verses 1 through 10. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together all his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I have lost." Just so, I tell you, there's joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. I'm going to make a couple classical allusions today. One is to a story that's in the Odyssey. And the story is about Ulysses, Odysseus. And he's been away at the Trojan War, and it took him 11 years to get home. And his dog, who was just a puppy when he left, has managed to live to a great old age. And when Odysseus returns, he's unrecognizable to many people. Actually, to everybody. Because he's been through so much. But his dog recognizes him. Everybody else thinks it's just some old beggar who's come to the door. The dog walks up to him and greets him as only a dog can, and then lays down and dies. His life fulfilled. And we all have heard similar stories about a dog whose owner has gone off to war or has gone away for some reason and will sit at the front door day in and day out for years. And then when the traveler returns, the dog jumps up and is all over them and licks their face and their hands and won't let go, is just barking and jumping and wagging his tail until he won't ever again let this human being out of his sight. And it's a heartwarming story. And we all know that feeling, don't we? About somebody who has gone away and has come back into our lives, and we don't want to let them go. Somebody who has gone through some terrible ordeal and come through it safely. And we don't want them ever to have to go through that again, and we don't want to let them out of our sight. Or maybe we react in other ways. You know, here's a question that comes up sometimes. And it's not about a person so much. But what if it's the dog that goes away? When I look at a telephone pole and I see a poster for a lost dog or a lost cat, at first my heart really goes out to the animal. Especially if it's in the winter and it's cold and you have no idea whether the animal has the wherewithal simply to survive. And then the sign stays there and no one comes and takes it down. And it's there for a few days, it's there for a week, it's there for a month. Sometimes much longer. And then my heart goes out not only to that animal, but to the person that put the sign up. How long are they going to be holding on, thinking that the animal is coming back? I mean, it's one thing to have the story about the dog that doesn't really understand all that can go wrong. It just knows that its person didn't come back that day or the next, but maybe they'll come back today. When it's a human being, and it's a human being waiting, we know a little bit more about what can go wrong and what could be keeping this person away, and how it becomes less and less likely over time. after a while, you begin to feel for the person that put that poster up, and maybe even wonder about the cycles of remorse that they may be feeling about the loss of a simple animal. When I come to this part of the Gospel of Luke, it makes me wonder whether maybe God goes through similar convolutions, whether God goes through similar experiences over us, even knowing what is going on, but thinking over and over again, when will this person be back in the right place? When will they get it together? When will they work things out? When will people, well, I said it before, when will they get it together? There are 3 stories in the 15th chapter of Luke, all of which involve somebody looking for something that has been lost. And the first is an animal. It's a sheep that has wandered off. And the shepherd is so worried about that one sheep that he leaves the other 99 that he's responsible for, and he goes off into the wilderness looking for that one missing sheep, which he finds. And he picks it up and he throws it over his shoulders and brings it back to the flock. The second story is about a woman who has lost a coin. And she rips her house apart frantically looking for the coin, wondering where it is. Where did it roll? Where did she drop it? Was she being careless? Was she... Well, had she been robbed? What happened to it? Until finally, she finds it. The third story in Luke 15 is not one that we heard today, but it's a familiar one. It's the story of a son who is lost. He's lost by his father. He's also a brother who is lost to his brother. He goes off on his own, in his own tangent, goes off into his own little world, and here it's by choice. And what happens when he comes back? What happens is that he finds out, we all find out, that the father has been watching for him anxiously this whole time, waiting for his return, just torn apart inside like the shepherd, like the woman who'd lost the coin, but even more so. And his brother, who has been watching all of that and has known what his brother's choices did to his father, and maybe to himself as well. When the brother returns, there's a whole layer of resentment, a whole layer of anger, maybe even a little bit of jealousy that's added to the situation. And the 2 threads that run through all 3 stories are the sense of anguish and loss, but also the joy of finding. A joy that the shepherd shows in his own life, a joy that the woman is so excited with and so filled with that she calls her neighbors together and says, "Come, rejoice with me." A joy that the father expresses by throwing his missing son a party and inviting everybody to come share, but a joy that the brother doesn't want
to share. These are stories about God and about God feeling sorrow for the loss of even one human being, and the joy of God at the finding of even one human being. And these are stories about how God invites us to be part of both of those aspects of life together, of life together with God and with our brothers and sisters. Now, I don't know if we who are not God really have the capacity to share the sense of loss that God feels anywhere near as deeply as he does. I honestly believe that if we did, it would totally overwhelm us. Here's my next classical reference in this sermon. It's also to someone else who was in the Trojan War, but on the other side, on the Trojan side, a man named Aeneas. And in Virgil's poem about how he lives his life when he has lost his city and much of his family and goes out into the world after Troy is destroyed. And he comes to a place where he has an experience of the deep, deep tragedy of his own life, but not only of his, but of other people's lives. And Virgil, the poet, has a very simple and short way of expressing this. In Latin, he says, sunt lacrimae rerum. And English translators have been trying to translate that for centuries. And Seamus Heaney, and the Irish poet, puts it this way. He says, there are tears at the heart of things. And when we look at the losses that are involved in the world, and the people that go off in all sorts of different ways, and the things that just fall apart, the people who fall apart, sunt lacrimae rerum. There are tears for this. And there's a kind of sadness that if you stay and dwell with it too long, will rip your heart out and will paralyze you and could even push you off the edge. The tears at the heart of things. And that's what God feels. That which we cannot. He feels it for his whole creation. And yet, although we, by necessity, step back from that, not to feel anything at all, or simply to brush things off lightly, as if that aspect were not there in the world, would be to disrespect God's sense of loss. And in a way, doing that would compound it. When a friend loses someone, say a family member, and even if it's somebody that you yourself didn't know, you go to see your friend. You go to share that moment or two of sadness. Not saying it doesn't exist, but recognizing it and honoring it. And not feeling it like your friend may, but on the other hand, certainly not saying, forget about it. Let's go bowling. Let's go to the movies. Let's get your mind off things. In the same way, and let's flip this over. In the same way, when somebody reaches out to you with some good news, say that you have a friend who lost her wallet and all her ID and all her credit cards and everything were in it. And she's been just going absolutely crazy, searching everywhere, trying to find it, wondering if somebody went into her purse and took it, wondering if for some reason she couldn't trust the people around her, wondering if she had left it carelessly somewhere and was just her own fault, and wondering at the same time if somebody was using her identity and running everything up on the charge cards, and then it's suddenly found intact and with nothing touched. How can you not share her happiness? Maybe you're not feeling it the same way, but you got to share some of it. It's only natural. And then if a missing person instead of a wallet turns up after they've been gone, wouldn't that mean even more? And yet, it can sometimes be hard for us to be happy for one another in a deep way when it's somebody who, like in the prodigal son story, has messed up in some significant way. And they finally do get things right. They finally do pull things together. They finally do turn things around. But when they come back, it's with baggage. And when we meet them, it's with baggage. Maybe it's just out of caution that they're going to get things wrong again. And we don't want to put ourselves through that same cycle. Maybe it's out of concern that it isn't genuine. There are all sorts of reasons we could hold things at a distance before we start jumping up and down. And honestly, maybe it makes some sense to have some sort of mutually recognized probationary period before all the hoopla starts up again. But eventually, maybe it's right away, but maybe it's down the road, but eventually, there does come the day when something clicks and we can clearly hear the voice of God saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Rejoice with me, for your brother who had been lost and had been dead is alive again." And when we hear that call to rejoice, it can make a big difference in everybody's lives. And what a difference it does make in the life of the person who has been going through whatever. I knew somebody who had been in and out of rehab several times. And when she got out of rehab this one time, people looked at her with a little bit of caution, as you would, wondering, well, here we go. Has this one taken? Is this one going to hold? And none of this was a secret. Everybody in the congregation where she was a member knew her story. It was in a small town, so a lot of other people did too. But even in church, about a quarter of the people there were her relatives to begin with. So there was nothing hidden about it. And then one Sunday, her mother came in, and she pulled the organist aside and she pulled me aside. And she let us know that her daughter had reached the first anniversary of her sobriety the previous day. And when it came time in worship to share our joys and our concerns, her mother stood up and said that she wanted that day to thank God for giving her her daughter, not once as a child, but twice. Once in the beginning, and now this time again. And you could hear her voice. And you knew that this was the word that said, rejoice, 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 be happy. Hey, everybody. And the organist, he hit a sudden chord, just one of those, wah, and everybody started singing. They started singing because the acolyte, who happened to be her cousin, was coming down the aisle carrying a cake. And on the cake was one of those candles in the shape of a 1 for her first year completed. And it was her second birthday. And as the acolyte carried the candle up to her, and as the organ started playing, everybody joined in. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary. And you know what? I still get choked up when I think about that. We sing another song from time to time. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. It has another verse that says, we share each other's woes, our mutual burdens bear, and often for each other flows the sympathizing tear. And that's true. And because it's true, not only does the tear flow, but also because of that tie that binds, the laughs come, and the smiles come, and the rejoicing comes, and the hearts swell up. And God says, rejoice. That which was lost is found. You know, that day, I am sure of it, that day Jesus was right there with us. And not only in that moment, but later on, he was out there in the narthex sharing a piece of that cake with everybody else and with her, eating and being with tax collectors and sinners and all of us people. I have no doubt that this Sunday, Jesus is going to be here with us in this room. And something will be going on, and somebody will have something to rejoice about. And he'll be laughing about it with them and smiling about it. And you know, maybe he'll be right there with all of us, not only when we say, thank you, Lord, But afterward outside, when we've got an ice cream truck coming, standing in line with us saying, hey, why not ice cream? There's always something good. There's always something good. And you know what? That woman, by the way, she is still sober. And she has kept herself together. She has been kept together. And she's helped keep other people together through some very difficult times since that day. With God's help, and with people around her who know how to mourn for one another and know how to rejoice with and for one another. There are battles that people fight every single day. And by God's grace, whether everybody else around them knows it or not, they win them. There are people in Jesus' parables who say, rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. And Jesus says, even if we're not rejoicing, the angels are rejoicing. There are people who fight these battles all the time. And he helps them and is there with them. He's there with everybody, whatever we face. And in the midst of this battle, we have a sister who's been through that. And the thing that I didn't tell you about was her name. Victoria. Victory. Can't make that one up.